Hi, I'm Liz Lightstone. I'm very proud to be the only currently non-US practicing nephrologist on the Council of Women in Nephrology. And this is just a little video to introduce myself. I'm what I call an accidental nephrologist, and I've realized from Twitter recently that many of us are. I did my undergraduate training in Cambridge University, and then I moved to King's College Hospital, London. And I really avoided all knowledge of kidney disease because I never really understood physiology. Probably still don't. And I missed my kidney week as an undergraduate at King's because I had a cold when I was sent away. So I knew no kidneys. And when I embarked on an academic career early on, as doing sort of what I think in America would be second, third year junior resident jobs, I avoided applying for kidney jobs, but then I had to because the job I wanted was misadvertised and I didn't see it. And I ended up at Guy's renal unit long ago and far away in 1985 and completely fell in love. I fell in love, I think, more with the personalities than with the speciality initially. But it was such an exciting place to be. I worked with Professor Stuart Cameron, Dr. Gwyn Williams, and my absolute hero, Dr. Chisholm Ogg. And they were inspirational leaders who ran the most fantastic multidisciplinary team. We were all on first name terms, patients, consultants, nurses, everybody. And it was such an exciting time. We were starting hemofiltration. And renal disease was very different in those days, not necessarily the disease, but the treatments we offered. We didn't dialyze people much at all, but certainly not over 60 or 65. We didn't transplant people with type 2 diabetes, etc., etc. And of course, that's all changed hugely. And I remember asking if I could do nephrology and my boss telling me, yes, of course I could, but there's no room for part-time. And of course, what there was not no room for at that time, but what there were none of were women. So I followed my path in a very male-oriented time. You'd go to the Renal Association later on and they were all men in suits. I then went on and was lucky enough to win my residency at the Hammersmith, the Royal Postgraduate Medical School. And there you were expected to go on and do a very basic science PhD, which I did, funded by the Medical Research Council, in mouse T-cell subsets long ago and far away. And then I did a post that was done at University College. And then I came back to the Hammersmith, where I've actually been ever since. And it's now Imperial College. I did a postdoc, and that was actually a very difficult time in my career because I was far more interested in trying to have children, which had proven difficult. You can see the two of them at the back there a few years ago, but it took a long time to get there, and that's what I actually spent most of my postdoc doing. And then I became an attending in 1995 with already, I was very clear my interests were glomerular disease, but particularly lupus nephritis, and I took on a lupus clinic. And I set up a completely new service of renal disease and pregnancy, more or less on a whim, because in those days you could, and have developed that service over many years, and now also run a dedicated pre-pregnancy counselling service. And I would say in terms of my career trajectory, there were then some quite difficult times because it was very, very busy clinically. We, much later on in 2005, went through a merger with our colleagues at Charing Cross and St Mary's to become the West London Renal Unit, and we're the largest renal unit in the UK. We have an enormous patient workload. And I had a big disparity between my sort of clinical interests and my research interests, trying to maintain a research interest in basic science. And along the way, developed an interest in health inequalities, and particularly we serve a very diverse population in West London. It was very noticeable that people from the Indian subcontinent were ending up on dialysis much more frequently than they should. And I did some early research on that and highlighted the health inequalities. And that's a theme that's continued, but has also been taken up nationally, which I'm very proud. So I would say for some years, my career intentions were not quite aligned with how my career was going. And actually it was a period of ill health in the early 2000s that allowed me to rethink. I went part-time, my kids were little, not that little, 8 and 10 at the time. And I focused much more on clinical, and then was able to really align my clinical interest to my research interest much better, went far more into clinical research. And as things came together and I was much happier in doing all I was doing, so success some degree came, and rather late in life, I would say, compared especially to my male peers, I finally was promoted to full professor in 2014, and quite a long time after I became an attending. And I'm very proud to be a professor at Imperial College. And since then, I've diversified. I was for years on service on the wards, and very recently have stopped doing that. And that would be treating all comers. And my clinical practice is glomerular, mostly lupus nephritis and renal disease in pregnancy. But I have academic roles within college, which are fascinating and are all to do with promotions and discipline and supporting academics. And that sort of builds on my background of, I hope, some successful mentoring and training over many years, particularly of interns and women, often into academic careers and sometimes out of academic careers, because that might be the right path for them. And I'm really enjoying a quite portfolio career these days. I have interests outside of college. I'm a trustee of Kidney Research UK, which is the main funder of kidney research within the United Kingdom, and spends about £8 million a year on research. And that's a wonderful organisation to have been aligned to. This year, I've joined the Council of Women in Nephrology, which is an illuminating organisation really dedicated to promoting leadership and mentorship of women in nephrology. And I'm very proud that many of the trainees that I have mentored have gone on in academic medicine, but have also just made very successful careers for themselves as women in nephrology. And it's a fantastic year for women in nephrology. We have a president-elect of the ASN, Susan Quaggin, and we have a president-elect of the ISN, Agnes Fogo, both wonderful, wonderful female nephrologists. And we've got lots of work to do, but I think it is, when I grew up, there were no women role models for me, almost none. And I think now there's not a surfeit of them, there can never be a surfeit of them, but there are far more for the younger trainees coming up. So I've had an interesting career. I've had a lot of knockbacks, but quite a lot of success. And I think that's normal for all of us. And I'm very happy to be contacted during Kidney Week to discuss mentoring, to discuss leadership issues, or even to discuss your difficult cases of lupus nephritis or renal disease in pregnancy. Thank you for listening.